Hello everyone. Today we are going to see about K-means clustering and how to implement that model in Python programming. Before getting into the coding part, first let's see what is K-means clustering. K-means clustering is an unsupervised machine learning model which is implemented in Python and other machine learning codes. Unsupervised learning means you don't give both the input and output to the model. You just give the input to the model, and using that input, it segregates the input and predicts the output. Centroid-based clustering. K-means is a centroid-based clustering. By centroid, it means a data point around which the other points are segregated. When you initially give the data, the K-means model segregates the data into clusters. Each cluster will have a centroid, and the other data points in that cluster are surrounded by these centroids. Next, the core concept of K-means clustering. In K-means clustering, there is an iterative process. When you give the data, it randomly chooses a centroid for each cluster, and as the time goes on, it updates the centroid based on the mean of the data points present in that cluster. Once the previous cluster centroid and the present centroid matches for 2 times, then the model is optimized. The 4 steps that are involved in K-means clustering in Python programming are initialization. First, you have to initialize the number of clusters which is going to be segregated and randomly choose a centroid for each cluster. Second, assignment. We can assign the data points to each cluster based on how close they are to the cluster. The closest centroid is chosen and the data point is given to that cluster. Update. After doing this process, we update the centroid. This updation is based on the mean of data points present in that cluster. After repeating this assignment, once the centroid doesn't change for twice, then we can know that the model is optimized and is ready to go. Real world applications of K-means are retail and marketing. This is hugely used in user recommendation feeds and image compressions and cybersecurity fields. Now let's go to the coding part. Here, what we have is a simple Python code for K-means clustering. First, we are importing pandas as PD. Pandas is a Python library used for data structuring. Import matplotlib.pyplot as PLT. This library used to plot the data as graph in that model. From sklearn.cluster, we are importing K-means. Here, K-means is a class inside which all the functions that are needed to K-means are present. First, we are going to read the CSV file mal_customer_1.csv file. This is a CSV we are going to use in this experiment, and we get the data for which we are going to segregate clusters. Then we are going to print the first 5 rows of this model. Here in output, you can see the first 5 rows of the CSV file with its columns. Next, we are going to define X. Here, as it is an unsupervised model, we don't need to define Y. We are just defining X. X is equal to df of, which gives us the data structure. And we are taking the columns annual income and spending scores, which are going to be used as independent variables in this case. Next, we are going to initialize the model. Model is equal to K-means of. Class of, we are going to give the constructor. Constructor needs 2 things. N clusters. N clusters gives the number of clusters needed, which is 5, and number of random state, which is 42 for optimization. Then we are going to define a new column in the df named df cluster, and we are going to give model.fit_predict of X. This defaultly gives the value of the cluster which is assigned for the X to the df cluster, which that means it means that based on the value of annual income and spending score, model predicts which cluster this data point belongs to, and that data point is stored in df cluster. Then we are predicting the whole data set. Here are almost 200 entries in this data set, and now we can see there is a new column named cluster, and it has the data points such as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which are the cluster names. Now we are going to plot a graph for this situation. plt.scatter of X annual income, which is the first column, yx, X spending score, which is the Y, and C is equal to df of cluster. We are going to plot C, which is the cluster point, the central X and Y based on the clusters. Next, we are going to print the centroid value, which is done by scattering model dot cluster underscore centers of 0, which gives us the centroid of column 1 and column 2. And we are going to segregate these centroids from the actual data by using color is equal to ren and marker is equal to x and size is equal to 200. Now we are going to label the graph as x-axis is equal to annual income by x label and y-axis is equal to spending score by y label, and the title of the graph is going to be customer segmentation using Kmeans. After giving plt.show off, if you run this code, you will get the graph like this. Here each cluster is given a different color for identification purpose, and the centroid of each cluster is given in an red X mark, which is optimized. Now we have learned how to implement a basic K-means clustering program in Python using Jupyter Notebook. Thank you.